good time zone. And a happy birthday to all of those around the world. We're back with another session for reading Terra, A Journey. It is storm season though, and unfortunately, I know not of a way to actually prevent thunder from being heard, so if it gets real bad, we will probably take a break, and hopefully it passes quickly. If not, maybe we'll have to end early, which is also why we're starting a tiny bit early as well. While the air is clear and the sky is blue. Last time we went through Laterano. Was it only Laterano? Might have also been Titania. I don't remember. Definitely Laterano. We got a little bit of Laterano left. And then moving on to the next country. So let's get into it. Bam. Time zone rubber.doc. Yeah, so we got a little bit of Laterano, the influence of Lateran faith outside of Laterano, which has always been a thing I've been curious about. It comes up every once in a while. Obviously, as you can see, Church of Iberia is a big thing. Next country is Iberia. But what is the faith like in other countries? We do know that we see some monasteries elsewhere. There's some monasteries in like Victoria. There's at least a monastery in Bolivar. Maybe there's some in Colombia, but most of those countries don't seem to have actually embraced it as like an official faith, from what I can tell. But let's find out. Maybe this will explain a bit more. Yeah, so influence of Lateran faith outside of Laterano. There is one clear upside to living in Laterano, but many downsides. And one of those downsides is that the closer you are to the geographic core of the Lateran faith, the harder it is to grasp every aspect of it. The Sancta of Laterano believe that desert and explosions go hand in hand, while the statues of saints carrying guns turn a deaf ear to this particular belief. In reality, if the First Tribunal's records on the deeds of the saints are accurate, these saints spent much of their lives destroying urban infrastructure. Putting aside these complaints for a moment, the influence of the Lateran faith has long since soared over the white walls of the church, having sowed itself far from the holy city. The Lateran faith provides a vision of a harmonious life. This vision can unite people as one community, a weapon they can use to resist pain and suffering, just as firearms were passed down from the saints to their fellows. What converted the earliest Liberi to the faith was the miracle of the holy city itself, and the peace and harmony that the law brought with it. As His Holiness Evangelist the 11th once told me, even if the popes of the Holy City do not consider themselves the highest leaders... Oh, I skipped a line. Apologies. Even if the saints' travels ceased to exist, the foundation of the Lateran faith would never waver. It is very clear that the popes of the Holy City do not consider themselves the highest leaders of the faith. Whether spiritual or secular matters, they do not meddle in religious affairs outside of Laterano. In light of this, the varying interpretations of the Lateran faith by religious organizations in various regions of the land are no surprise. As part of our comparative study, we must cast our gaze to the Lateran faith outside the Holy City. An excerpt from a comparative study of religious or regional differences in Lateran faith. So that answers the one question already. That's not really been talked about. So is that despite being called the Pope, they are not the religious leader of the Lateran faith across Terra. They are the leader of Laterano, and I guess therefore the Lateran faith inside Laterano, but they do not oversee as the Pope does in real life for Catholicism. As for the Saints' Travels, if you don't know, that is a kind of I guess a holy book in a sense, depicting a history of certain saints. And I guess probably the faith as a whole. Then we have the Church of Iberia and the Inquisition. From the very first moments of the founding of Iberia, the royal family had declared the teachings of Laterano as the state religion. It was a nation built by believers. They had wanted to build a golden city on a southern peninsula, one that would rival the Holy City in its grandeur. The Church of Iberia was born from the royal family's accurate foresight on the political value of this common vision. Its clerics could serve as intermediaries between the royals and the nation's citizens, soothe conflict between local nobles, or use their status as faithful to act as diplomatic messengers, fulfilling many crucial roles in Iberian society. In addition, the devout Lateran Liberi preachers contributed significantly to the Church of Iberia in the early years, and so statues of Iberian churches often integrate Liberi plumage into their design. The Church of Iberia had once maintained close ties to Laterano, with its higher-ranked members often visiting the Holy City to accept the blessings of the Pope. But as Iberia grew in power and prosperity, the light of Laterano lost its sheen in the people's eyes, and the unshakable Holy City became no more than a small polity tucked away in the corner of Terra. Historical tradition had ebbed at that moment, yielding to the storm surge of the Golden Age. At the end of the war in 1031, the royal family officially placed support for an Iberian pope on the agenda, hoping to spread the influence of the Church of Iberia across an even wider area. However, before their noble advisors could convince the Church of Iberia to accept this arrangement, their profound silence sunk Iberia into enduring stillness. In the wake, the Iberian royal family completely lost their ability to maintain order within the nation. Under the leadership of the now Saint Carmen I Iberia, what a cool dude, the Church of Iberia was reorganized into the Inquisition. It led a complete revision of the sacred texts and scriptures and restructured the country's military might. The Inquisition replaced the Iberian royal family as the highest authority in the land, as well as its strongest bulwark against the threat of the ocean. The Inquisition of today does not retain the system of clergy that the Church of Iberia once had. Instead, it revolves around the three ranks of Saint, High Inquisitor, and Inquisitor. The Saint of the Inquisition is not a true position, but rather an honorific title reserved for the 9 high-level members who had reorganized the Church. The statues of Iberia swapped their guns for lamp and rapier of the Inquisitor, and scripture went from praising the law to upholding the lofty morality of Iberia. Getting a little sneak peek of Iberian history there as well. So we have different statues, Iberian and Laterano. Laterano's got guns and represents a Sancta. Iberia has the rapier and more of a Liberi appearance. As Iberia's faith diverged from the norm during its inexorable march of progress, religious icons incorporating Liberi plumage became even more common in the nation. These icons set aside the guns of Laterano and took up the rapier, symbolizing Iberia's martial tradition, along with the lantern representing Iberia's maritime culture. Once the profound silence cut ties between Iberia and Laterano, the Church of Iberia was reorganized into the Inquisition, and Carmen and other reorganizers were conferred the title of saint. The rapier and lantern became symbols of the new order, turning these icons into representatives of the saints of Iberia in the truest sense. And then over here we have Calcett's comment about Iberia. The seaborne worshippers infiltrating Iberia have leveraged the Lateran faith to expand their influence, concealing their identities and intentions. Even before the profound silence, the seaborne worshippers hidden among the Aegir Islanders had begun covertly interpreting the doctrines of the Church of Iberia in their own ways. After the profound silence, the Church of the Deep took advantage of society's collapse to expand aggressively, even extending their influence to the desperate royals and nobles. As a result, the Inquisition deemed them the paramount threat. In addition, rumors of the Inquisition using torture on civilians suspected of heresy have spread widely among the people of Iberia. However, most of these rumors are fabricated by the Church of the Deep in an attempt to undermine public support for and trust in the Inquisition. Okay. If you say so, Captain. I'll trust her. Lateran faith in Siracusa. I actually forgot. Yeah, the Lateran faith is kind of a thing in Siracusa. "60 or so years ago, the heir of Familia Cecilia returned from Laterano with a cleric in tow, alongside her plans for a new Syracusan order. The young Signora Cecilia once openly stated that she did not hold faith in the teachings of Laterano because the law itself held no power. The miracles of the Holy City were born from the devout who used the law as their code of conduct, no matter where they are from or whether they are Sancta or Liberi. After returning to Siracusa, the two of them reinterpreted the Lateran faith into a doctrine of pistole et ordine, pistols and order, using it to sharpen the Familia's chipped fangs. Order would constrain violence and tame it into a precise gun. Loyalty and obedience would nourish the dying Familia and allow it to be reborn. This doctrine has been implemented in Signora Cecilia's Grey Hall, dominating Syracusa's underground society with an iron fist. The cleric Agonir preached the law to the Familia and also preached about obedience and loyalty to one's familia, leading to the birth of a new faith. Obviously, the object of this new devotion is not the law of Laterano, but the familia itself. In other words, the faith of Siracusa and the faith of Laterano are two completely different entities. On one hand, under the influence of the Lateran faith, the leaders of the familia have become godfathers or godmothers, though this hardly turns them into avatars of mercy and justice. These godfathers and godmothers represent the brute force behind their familia, and their laws are made manifest in violence. Obeying the law and submitting to violence are equal to them. On the other hand, the unified order of the Grey Hall, comprised of various representatives of the familia, outwardly imitate the 7 tribunals of Laterano. The establishment of the Grey Hall has stamped out any desire for movement in the ranks, and unrestrained violence cannot exist under this ordered society of familia. Due to her subtle reinterpretation of Laterano's teachings, Signor Cecilia is known as the La Papisa della Siracusa, the Madam Pope of Siracusa. Yeah, so she brought the idea of the faith and twisted it to her own means in order to establish an authority within or among the families and the mafia. But it's like not anything to do with actual religion. So I guess that shows that only those 2 countries really have any sort of establishment in Lateran faith. Everyone else is just... There are some monasteries in other countries, but nothing significant. So which brings us to Iberia. The Golden Age will return again. Probably not, though, actually. The lesson of Iberia is that they gotta find a new way forward for themselves. They can't keep looking back and hope that they can return to what was. They need to find a new path. On occasion, dreams of the sea still crawl in through the shutters on my window. I dream of those great golden galleons cresting above the waters, Ferdinanda leaning against the figurehead at the prow. Her face was as bright as the day she first set sail, her black plumage fluttering in the sea wind. There were the young folk of the shipyards and the old fellows of the lighthouses too. They all came back. Mateo Martinez Alvaro ran an Iberian restaurant in Siesta that I would hesitate to call popular. His gazpacho was certainly unlike any Iberian gazpacho I had before. Upon learning that I had frequented Iberia during her golden years in the 20s and 30s, he admitted to me that he had long forgotten what true Iberian cuisine tasted like. In the wake of the profound silence, he spent over a decade making porridge for church relief work. That porridge was flavored with crusted sea grass and tree bark, alongside sandy artificial sweeteners scavenged from abandoned factories. The bowl of soup placed before me with its uncertain Colombian or Victorian provenance was already the best that he could do. I tried to gather more from him about Iberia's present circumstances. He spoke at length on the subject, but also kept his silence at times. In the end, he asked me, "What is Iberia? Where has she gone?" And this picture is an Iberian mobile city. specifically an Iberian aquatic mobile city. Overview. Since the decline of the Sargonian Empire, the second nation that described its land and fortresses as golden was Iberia. In the distant past, her vast territory stretched southward to lands that no longer exist today. If one were to stand atop an embankment and squint into the distance, one would see a string of lights and sails. That was the coast of Iberia. It was a time when the storehouses and halls of the palace could not contain the vast, strange, and wondrous treasures flowing into the nation. Iberia's kings set up displays on every street in every city, so that all who stepped into her ports could admire her riches. In the year 1038, a disaster from the sea descended upon Iberia, although there was definitely drenching, snuffing out her lighthouses and submerging her palaces beneath the waves. Since the descent of the profound silence, there has been hardly a whimper out of Iberia thanks to the Inquisition's lockdown. It has come to the point where even the Iberians themselves cannot say whether their former glory has carried on, or if it is a mark of her coming end. But they know that Iberia's struggles are far from over. Official language, Iberian. Dominant groups, Liberi. Currency, doblon. An Iberian doblon, as Iberia has not renewed coining molds past Calamity. Each mint year of issue appears predating 1038. Obverse, King's bust has been forcibly filed off. The monarchy was excommunicated by the Inquisition for failing in their sworn duty as protectors of the people. Dang, I didn't know that. So they've not minted new coins, they just filed off the image of the king. And we've got some sort of Spanish here. What does it say? Una canción a lo lejos, a song in the distance. History of Iberia. The founding kings of Iberia may have upheld the virtues inherent in Lateran saints to a fault, but after several centuries, in the age of wanton Iberian expansion, wisdom and intelligence were no longer considered the most important virtues by the royal family. What the king would much rather see as his offsprings was a desire for exploration and conquest. If, say, a crown prince showed a more modest and kinder nature during his childhood alongside a disdain for worldly affairs, he would find his place in the line of succession slipping through his fingers like sand. Correspondingly, anyone with enough ambition and foresight to pursue great riches and untapped lands would enjoy royal funding and support. When the explorer Francisco de Leon spoke of his ambitions before the king, there was not a single soul in the court who was not moved by his fervor. In the end, he was appointed the representative of Iberia in its westward expansion. The royal crest embroidered upon the sails of every ship, de Leon avoided the Victorian blockade via skillful use of waterways, and he persuaded the Padishahs of Sargon to construct a trade route for him. His final act of exploration was discovering the fertile plains of Bolivar in the northwest of Terra. Thanks to all the wealth he sent back to Iberia, the king happily granted him the title El Conquistador, and named him the Viceroy of the Viceroyalty of Bolivar. So he was the guy who founded Bolivar, effectively. So that explains how that worked. So Iberia was out exploring the mainland. He still went past like Sargon, but they made a trade route. I see. Also, what's up with the Victorian blockade? Guess we'll learn about that at some point. Iberia's expansion provoked unease in the nations surrounding it. Newly appointed padishahs tore up the agreements with their predecessors and broke the trade routes between Iberia and Bolivar. Victoria, Gaul, Itania, and several other nations jointly pressured Iberia to try and sever their connection with the interior of Terra. However, by the time the viceroyalty of Bolivar was forced to declare independence from Iberia, the Iberians had already found new routes elsewhere. Independent settlements and city-states scattered along the coast either submitted to Iberia or sought cooperation in a time of prosperous trade league. In time, a prosperous trade league rose along Terra's southern coast. Do you have a date for this? No. At some point in the past. Well, that's a concerning image. Las últimas notas. The latest news. Page won't sit down by itself. In the year 913, so I guess that was before 913 question mark? I don't know. Is it Bolivar that old? That's pretty old. In the year 913, Iberia welcomed her first residents from the ocean. These Aegir, also known as islanders, hoped to settle on Iberian soil. The Aegir, fresh out of the sea, were unfamiliar with Iberian court etiquette, and when facing the Golden Throne, they did not bow nor use elegant speech. Despite that, the art and technology they brought with them caused no small amount of wonder among the Iberians. Upon seeing the sparkling streams rhythmically circulating about the elaborate face of a compass, indicating all the currents of an entire stretch of the sea, a fierce ambition ignited within the king of Iberia, brighter than ever before. After the islanders came ashore, Iberia began a new era of unprecedented prosperity, one the most Iberian nowadays call the Golden Age. With chief naval architect Briogan as their representative, many Aegir islanders still feared threats from the ocean, and they tried to prepare as best they could before disaster struck. Their efforts proved to be a great impetus on the development of Iberia's economy and technology. Meanwhile, the royal family and the nobles would find ways to turn the islanders' research and technology towards seizing more wealth and power. Upon the completion of the ostentatious Golden Armada, rather than heading south to the open seas to conduct scientific exploration as Briogan expected, it instead grandiosely sailed through the straits into the inland sea, where the Victorian dukes and Sargonian padishahs alike stared in amazement. The Golden Armada patrolled the inland sea for several years. Royal artisans held never-ending banquets aboard the flagship where they unceasingly composed odes of praise towards Iberia until every part of the ship was covered in layer upon layer of symbolism. Those who could remember and explain all of this symbolism were rewarded with vast sums of money alongside the title of Witness of Glory, becoming honorary officers of the flagship. As the surveyors of the profound silence thought back to the past while crammed in that temporary housing they could find. Perhaps they understood the meaning of the Golden Age better than those who lived within the Golden Age itself. Before the silence, Iberia was already full of perplexities, and while praise for the Golden Age was omnipresent, the reality of the people living within it was not always as glorious as the songs told. One indisputable value pushed all Iberians towards the unconventional. At the start of the 11th century, more and more people abandoned property that their families had held for generations to blindly step into the unknown, seeking new roads befitting the spirit of the Golden Age. Those who were steadfast and dutiful were branded defeatists and laggards. Iberia's glory was inseparable with the toil of her workers and farmers, but as these low-class workers walked the streets, they would be greeted with ear-splitting jeers, reprimanding them for their lack of initiative, lambasting them as disgraces of the Golden Age. The excess productivity created by the islanders' technology was able to momentarily cover up the many cracks in society. But if the profound silence had not struck, would the gradual appearance of these cracks have broken the facades of glorious Iberia? Interesting. So it was a bit of a gilded age than a golden age. Aegir technology. Aegir, I guess, like, automation helped with things, but a lot of people were just abandoning all work to go explore. Up here we have a water flow meter commonly used by the Aegir. It can monitor the flow of ocean currents in real time. After receiving one from the islanders, the King of Iberia never again wore a watch. I have no need to check the time any longer, for time belongs to no man. However, I must inspect the ocean at all times, for it is my ocean. I think Lugal Shargaz would have something to say about time belonging to no one. And down here, a popular collectible from the Golden Age, now no longer welcome. Is there a ship in the bottle, looks like? In the wake of the profound silence, the Iberians discovered that this collectible would induce a hollow feeling that was hard to accept. A great flagship trapped within the narrow bottle. The glories of the Golden Age seemed so insignificant, helpless, perhaps even ridiculous. And so for the sake of keeping their memories of the Golden Age pure, people would throw out these bottles from that era. And then it looks like Calcit is just this is all just Calcit's own edition about the Seaborn. With some sick art. As early as several centuries ago, Iberians who set off to sea discovered strange aquatic creatures who looked like fins but were not. At that point, Iberians did not yet know what the Seaborn were, but these strange appearances piqued the Iberians' curiosity. For a long time, Iberians were obsessed with collecting sea terrors for many of varying shapes and sizes, and turning them into luxuries. Of course, before the profound silence, the term sea terror didn't even exist in Iberia. People gave them various different names based on their individual characteristics. It wasn't until the islanders reached the shore that the Church of the Deep, the sea-born worshippers, spread through Iberia on a large scale. Over the following century, while other Aegir diligently worked in scientific and technical fields, the Church of the Deep cultists had already sown the seeds of disaster within Iberia's intellectual, cultural, and social sphere. Why is there an ant in my book? Try to read this. It's so tiny. She wrote so tiny. The Church of the Deep spread many legends about the Seaborn throughout Iberia. Many such tales describe a giant, sunlit, fruit-bearing tree at the center of the ocean. Upon maturity, the fruit fell from the tree and into the ocean, eventually becoming sea terrors. Other stories speak of primordial beings slumbering on the ocean floor, who were born alongside the world itself. And all those legends are true. Those are all actually true, although I'm not sure about the sunlit part, but those are all true. Over eons, sunlit sculpted I'm not sure that sentence makes sense. Over eons, sunlit sculpted these beings from various angles, shaping them into the bizarre forms we now know as sea. Okay, that's a legend, I guess. The sunlight sculpted them into various bizarre forms. In the decades leading up to the profound silence, as sea terrors began appearing more frequently along Iberia's shores, the nation was in the midst of a craze to buy up the wonders of the sea. Children living by the sea played with toys modeled after sea terrors, while the king spent a fortune searching for the 5-meter-tall shell of a giant sea terror, hoping to carve it into a statue symbolizing his royal authority. Admittedly, most islanders unaffiliated with the Church of the Deep harbored a deep aversion to and fear of the sea. However, their stern warnings were far less captivating to the Iberians than the mysterious legends awarded by the Church of the Deep. Pretty well. And the last few words there were a bit hard. So obviously the tree from which bearing fruit is the cerebral arbor. Cerebral arbor. And the primordial beings, which includes the arbor, are the firstborn, which are a group of Fahrenmutts, aquatic-based Fahrenmutts. Of which the sea terrors, the seaborn, are from. The sun imagery is interesting. I'm not sure if that's ever really been mentioned before. I can only assume it has something to do with the mantle ruins. Maybe the mantle itself? I don't know. Now we have a little excerpt from Those Who Live in Tomorrow. In a tavern overlooking the sea in the year 1032, A worker by the name of Juan Gomez Castro described what he saw of the Golden Age to me. By the time the youths reach the age where they need to start planning ahead, their minds are full of things like research, creation, and exploration, nothing more. That's how Iberia is. You'll only be considered successful if you make some technological breakthrough, come up with some new type of art, or discover some nice, fertile land. My father was born with such dreams of success, and he spent the latter half of his life atoning for that dream. Against the wishes of my grandmother, he wanted to study the supreme art of swordsmanship, the destreza, in his youth, but he didn't get anything out of it other than some swelling in his wrist. The night that my grandmother passed away, he suffered from heart palpitations for the first time, an affliction that would plague him for many years. Up until I was grown, he would take our earnings to take part in those research projects that my grandmother wanted him to join in the first place. My mother tried to get him to accept his mediocrity, but she herself was hardly mediocre. After their last quarrel in the matter, my mother took all his research data in a rage and fashioned them into a carving made out of a stack of paper. The carving was displayed at the Port Art Exhibition that year, receiving praise as a piece that broke the mold. That was the sort of thing I saw growing up, so I never felt like I was doing anything wrong when I took more than a decade's worth of savings from my parents to buy a boat and seek a crew to explore. Honestly speaking, we didn't enjoy our time at the sea, but we never did question the spirit of that age. Despite the fact that we were only ever able to scoop up some stinky fins and rotten shells every time we went out to sea, I always felt like the Golden Age referred not to what we already had, but what we could accomplish, discover, or begin. Fernanda, a lovely girl with the fleet of the time, would lead us in singing the sea shanty that was brimming with hope. Tomorrow lies the Golden Age. But when that tomorrow came, I had not a doubloon to my name. Is it just doubloon? I guess it's just probably doubloon. I don't know. I'm not sure if that accent mark makes it an oo or an o. I don't know. I had no choice but to sell the boat off and give my crew their severance. I'm no captain anymore. Just an honest laborer. That's how my life is going to end. Fernanda joined a good fleet, and I heard she did plenty of things out at sea worthy of the history books. I'm happy for her, from the bottom of my heart. Glad I didn't hold her back with my uselessness. What I'm sorry for is her coming back ashore just to marry some chef with no aspiration of his own. After he finished speaking, there it is. After he finished speaking, for we see the dawn horizon glimmer, or he continued to sing a sea. After he finished speaking, he continued to sing that sea shanty. For we see the dawn horizon glimmer with light of gold, and cradle bows of great cerulean rose the sun, the tower of Terra's keeper lighting all and one. She bore from every branch her rarities galore. The sea will come to bless Iberia once more. I just had to make sure Fernanda wasn't the pirate captain in Exodus from a Pale Sea. It's not. She's not. That's Juana. Just had to make sure. It's not, though. This one I don't need a translation for. El silencio profunda, the profound silence. The disaster from the sea destroyed that vaunted Iberian glory. The Golden Armada quickly dispersed amidst the waves, while the eyes of Iberia were snuffed out one by one. The eyes of Iberia being the lighthouses. The music and the clamor of the royal palaces were lost to silence, as people within flapped their lips to no avail. Within the silence, disaster descended. No one could give a complete account of what happened next. This disaster, dubbed the Profound Silence by later generations, submerged more than half of Iberia's territory. When the sea retreated, the remnants of dry land were scattered, and what was once fertile fields were now barren, salted wastes. Alongside the loss of land, the manorial system of fiefdoms, the economic foundation, and the political base of Iberia both collapsed. The royals and nobles were unable to afford the resources to maintain their armies, and were unable to provide farmland to the farmers to till. After the manor granaries were looted dry, the surviving commoners lost the final reason for them to stay in their homeland. In the aftermath of the disaster, crop failure and riots racked Iberia, bringing her to the brink of collapse. We have an excerpt for those who live inside. In the drifts and drafts, or in dribs and drabs, Mr. Martinez told me about what he saw, heard, and thought while he fled. We followed someone from the church to a manor once owned by some Don who knows. There was a dead body sprawled out on the kitchen floor. It wore a flannel cloak striped black and gold and was holding a pile of pure gold tight in his arms, bite marks stabbed into the bars. Nobody said anything, but we were all scared as hell. If even the Dons were starving to death, was there simply no food in the entire country? Whenever I cook these days, I didn't have to add salt. Whenever I cooked those days, I didn't have to add salt. Everything around us was already stained in that white mineral. Everyone complained about how everything tasted bitter. Even just looking at salt made us nauseated, but we still tried our best to manage that bleached, salty soil. There was an Aegir lady traveling alongside us. She tinkered about and learned how to grow crops in that soil all by herself, and every day we would follow her example, digging ditches and canals or channels, plowing and harrowing the earth. She always reminded me of Fernanda. I had long lost all hope of her returning. She was out at sea when disaster struck. They said that those who died at sea became sea terrors. Rubbish, I'd say. She always knew that what she was doing when she lived, so she must have planned a good death for herself too. I was the one who didn't know what to do with my life. I would always wonder, why did I live? Couldn't have just been to cook up tree bark gruel and then watch people try and keep it down just to throw it up day in and day out, right? With communication paralyzed and the land drastically reshaped, post-silence Iberia bewildered even her natives. As people wandered the wastes, they were unable to find any familiar roads or buildings, or hear any familiar broadcasts or recitations. The occasional smoke rising from the darkness might indicate some bandits, while occasional rustling among the quiet often stemmed from a sea terror. The people sank into despair. They could not believe that the land beneath their feet was Iberia. Several surviving members of the Church of Iberia attempted to rebuild Iberia from the foundation up in a shape of their choosing. The Iberia of the past was portrayed as an arrogant conqueror, one that required her people to proliferate and spread over ever vaster territories. The Iberia of today would be holy in illuminating the darkness, and she required her people to gather together to protect her purity and morality. The ancient tomes of Laterano were based on laws and virtues, with the occasional story of a saint scattered within, but the Church of Iberia wrote their own version of the scriptures, one that could guide the people of Iberia and their lives after the silence. In this era of decay and collapse, perhaps this was for the best. According to the sermons, values do not rely on material goods. Even on the wastes devoid of anything, people can still live lives of virtue. The church did not only attempt to prop up people's spirits, it also tried to restore the basics of order in society and even set up planned management of food resources. While admittedly there were a few who fell to despair, who plundered food over the corpses of their clergy, there were those who despaired yet still held on to their faith as their final thread, hoping that by carefully adhering to the instructions they would be able to find salvation. The royal family had fallen into silence, but the people still sought shelter and salvation. They even began to pray to the founding king of Iberia, beseeching those long-buried bones to protect them. Many high-up clergy in the church urgently wished to appoint a pope to redirect the people's longings for salvation and establish a new authority within Iberia. But Archbishop Carmen repeatedly refused the proposal to install him as pope. Under his direction, the 9 archbishops of the church set aside their family names and took up Iberia as their own. They were also conferred the title of saint, and so they became the leaders of Iberia. When it comes to urgently setting up a government authority, saint might not have been the best of titles to pick for one's leader. While saint can easily stand for a trailblazer, it lacks the gravitas befitting a ruler. Ancient Lateran records tell of the first saints building their homeland with their own 2 hands while spreading their faith as their legs walked the land. As well, all well and good, but none of the tomes spoke of them ruling. But there was a reason why Carmen stubbornly insisted on this path. While the prospect of installing a pope was alluring, the price of defeat would be catastrophic. It would mean placing the hopes of all Iberians seeking salvation on the shoulders of one person, and if that person were unable to bear the weight, Iberia may shatter and never reform again. The headless Iberia struggled blindly against riots and famine. She was barely fit to be called a nation, as she faced adversity beyond what humans could comprehend. Under such a burden, people would shift from being an instrument to becoming a lure for the weak, at least for most of the people who hold no power at that time. Like how portraits of incompetent monarchs betrayed them as fierce and wise, they hide their lifelong mediocrity behind a facade of power. It can be inferred that Carmen and the other bishops did not wish nor dare to put themselves to the test in that way. So up here we have, what is this? I guess a Iberian church? Perhaps the church believes praying in a dim, ruined chapel is better than reminiscing about those royals and nobles buried at the bottom of the sea. Nobody wishes for the church to be so dark and dilapidated, of course, and the pious believers carefully wipe the windows clean every day. However, they remain covered while dust floating over from the sea, or covered in white dust. Floating over from the sea, the work never ends and the windows are never truly clean. And Calcit says, from Iberia's reckoning to Aegir conspiracy, from the wrath of the earth to the resentment of the sea, when post-silence Iberians speak of terrible calamity, their explanations vary widely. Those who endured the profound silence tried to make sense of the disaster that had befallen them, but most could only grope blindly in the darkness for answers. Many confused and fearful survivors first found their answers in the words of the Church of the Deep. According to the Church, Iberia's destruction was both punishment and salvation. The survivors, freed from the burdens of sin, could now rediscover the essence of humanity and pave way for a state of existence beyond humanity. The most devoted zealots threw themselves into the ocean, becoming sustenance for the swarms of seaborn. Whether these pious cultists chose this new form of existence voluntarily is difficult to determine. After being conferred the title of saint, Carmen, the first Iberia, gathered his supporters Is it the first or is it E? Is it Carmen of Iberia? I actually don't know. I've always assumed it was the first, but now I'm like, is it not actually that? Yeah, it's not the first. It's E, which makes more sense now. They're spelling it with an I in this book. It can be spelled other ways though. The capital I threw me off. After being conferred the title of Saint, Carmen E. Iberia gathered his supporters and completely reorganized the Church of Iberia, changing its name into the Iberian Inquisition. The Inquisition is not only a religious organization, but the nation's governing body. The survivors gathered together and threw themselves into their work, guided by their new laws. Slowly, the Iberian society rebuilt itself from the ground up. Yet, there were still many who had their criticisms of this new order, believing that the moral judgments presupposed by the trials and their punishments were too arbitrary. From the accounts of those Iberians who had personally experienced the disaster and the subsequent rebuilding, the rule of the Inquisition was harsher than that of the royal family, but it was the Inquisition who managed to stitch together the shattered remnants of Iberia back into a nation. One thing we can reflect on is this. In an age where value has crumbled away, should the people use what energy they have to spare to maintain an open and inclusive environment, or should the confused and tired people rather seek salvation from explicit guidance and convenient answers? That is a question. And the expert, those who live in yesterday. Talking about the efforts to rebuild after the silence, Mr. Martinez mentioned a group of workers he encountered while seeking refuge who had decided to throw themselves into reconstruction. We were drawn over by the sound of music. But there were no radio or television signals active at the time, and nobody would want to carry a gramophone and speakers while fleeing into the silence. Everyone's ears had been deadened by the winds of the wilderness, so hearing the music of the Golden Age felt like we were all in a dream. There were a group of people in workers' wear, knee-deep in a pile of bricks, hammering along to the beat of the tune. It seemed that they were building a house. compared to the gilded pre-silence record player next to the door beams, the things they were building looked rather shabby. But based on the crude carvings above the beams, they were still building things in the style of the Golden Age. These people said they had the family name Iberia. All of them did, apparently. Rather strange, no? Just like the saints of the Inquisition who came about after. But the saints did it to earn respect and love for the people. Why would these workers cling so strongly to that name? After all, they were not much welcomed by the Iberia at the time. At this point, a construction worker stopped to their work for a moment to give an explanation to Mr. Martinez. I know that everybody looked down on us, people like you and me, people who actually did the hard work and cooked the soup. In their eyes, we were just complacent. But it was their problem, not Iberia's. The lords and ladies had their own dreams and goals, research, exploration, swordplay, studying something or other. Even if Iberia was gone, there were things they could do, but us? All our lives, day after day, we were building Iberia in the factories. If Iberia was gone, what was left for us? A decent number of folk lost their will to live. It was old Juan who dredged us back out of the doom and gloom. After all the cities had shut down, he was the first to head back into the factory. The factory heads had long since fled, and nobody was there to pay him for any work. Also, without fuel or materials, the production lines just couldn't run. But old Juan didn't care. He'd hammer away in the dark depths of the factory every day. After that, more and more would follow him to work, even if they could not produce anything usable at all. We may all had been starving, but none of us stopped, for no other reason than to live as human beings. If the nobles want to rebuild Iberia, then we will. We are Iberia. Heck yeah. Someday. Well, maybe the Aegir will help them again. But the 12th century is looking pretty rough, so it's probably going to take a while. Geography. In the past, Iberia occupied a fertile peninsula in the south of the Terran landmass, commanding the channels connecting the inland sea with the open ocean. In the wake of the profound silence, the bustling ports of the southern coast were decimated. The survivors fled to the north, cowering in the once remote inland frontier. Presently, Iberia is defined by several long and narrow river deltas. Her terrain is low-lying and flat, with some hilly terrain scattered about its center and north. The coastline of Iberia was radically reshaped by the profound silence. Several generations of surveyors painstakingly measured Iberia's wounds by walking its breadth, sketching the form of the new coastline little by little. Nowadays, there are still Iberians who raise flimsy sails to search for surviving land, but the majority of the land swallowed by the sea has already been claimed by the sea terror for their nests. And this map is a patrol map drawn after the profound silence. 4 major inland hub cities are now no more than ruins poking out of the sea. To Iberian eyes, nowadays these glorious remains are the only reference points to estimate distance and heading, nothing more. So what does that say, map? Map of the vigilance of something. Mar might be sea, actually. If it's from mare, from Latin mare. Map of the Sea Watchers. Yeah, okay. It's all in Spanish, so we've got this one area, the zona prohibida. I would assume like forbidden zone. Yeah, the restricted area, the forbidden zone. Or I guess prohibited. Prohibida would be prohibited. So prohibited zone, which is along the coast. But outside of that is the zone of patrulla, which I think is patrol. Yes, it's the patrol zone. Bahia de Juan. I'm not sure what Bahia is. Bahia is bay. Okay, that makes sense. So the Bay of Juan is the water. So this is the map of the Bay of Juan, pretty much. I'm guessing these are former cities. El Mercado, La Casa Señorial, La Capilla. This Loma del Alba is Hill of Dawn. That's Loma del Dormilona. So another hill. The La Torre Baliza de Argueria is the Aguirre Beacon Tower. Lighthouse, maybe? And then La Centro de Servicio de Andar Flotas. The central service of the fleet management. Now, that looks like it's, unless they orientated the map differently, that should be on the west coast of the inland sea, I would assume. But there's a lot of islands and things, so who knows where that is, actually. There is no Bay of One on the map. So yeah, that could be anywhere. Anyway, economy. Not like they make anything nowadays, but in the past. Long before the islanders came ashore, Iberia had a solid economic foundation. Thanks to her fertile fields and well-developed drainage system, Iberia's agricultural and finning businesses were highly developed. Before these silence, every Iberian chef had to master more than 100 ways of preparing seafood before he could finish his apprenticeship. On top of that, Iberia's industrial development was comparable to the forefront of the nations of the core. When the Lateran city was being converted into a nomadic one, many of the industrial products required for such a feat were imported from Iberia. The introduction of islander technology resulted in excess productivity for a time, and extravagance was all the rage back then. However, after this silence, the vast majority of its sophisticated technology was abandoned. Since there was no energy or material supply and no corresponding demand, formerly busy factories now sank into silence of their own. The majority of the islanders' research was put to a halt by the Inquisition, the results left to rot, and finally inhabitants of the Bastion de Canticos, or Bastion of Hallowed Saints in Victorian. It is not until recent years that the Inquisition has gradually warmed up to allowing former Aegir technical staff to return to Iberia to resume their research. And here we have a popular Iberian rum made from sugarcane grown on the southern coasts. Even if the sugarcane sprouted in Iberia now, it would be salty from the inundated soil. And I'm pretty sure that's just a picture of the captain of the Saltafera Novice. What was his name? Alfonso. Yeah, that's just a picture of Alfonso. Is that actually branded Alfonso Brum, or that they just happened to use his image because they needed an image? And by they I mean the Hyperglyph as a company, or did he actually function as a mascot for this rum? Who can say? In addition, with the land inundated with salt and the sea occupied by sea terrors, Iberia's agricultural and finning industries are nearly extinct. Before the people were able to find reliable sources of food, Iberia experienced a financial crisis. At a time where a cartload of pure gold couldn't buy you a bag of food, people began to regard money and precious metals as burdens that could only slow them down as they fled. Bandits in the salt wastes looted food and clothing, but ignored silver, coins, and bars of gold as they laid in pools of blood. Many local economies returned to the bartering system. The Inquisition instated a plan to realign the population back towards manufacturing. Under their unified administration and pipelines, the planned economy model became the dominant economical system in post-Silence Iberia. Until today, the vast majority of Iberian industries are still under this economy model, planned and are controlled and operated by the Inquisition. We have lost technology. Underwater A-gear technology and land-based oranginium power were a graceful union in Iberia. Today's boldest industrial architects would consider golden Iberia's technological products to be wild and fantastical, whether household goods or machines for manufacturing. Among the most representative of these were a series of marvels related to sailing. Golden warships spread out across the seas, while the eyes of Iberia pierced the dark clouds, their dazzling luminescence forming a line that shined through the sea fog. But the king was not satisfied with decorating the ocean with dots and lines. He wanted to cleave the tides in Iberia's name. With great fanfare, the first batch of amphibious nomadic cities began construction along Iberia's endless coastline. Most of these cities were not completed before they were drowned in the silence. Due to the dramatic shift in the coastline, only a few ruins of these cities survived. These remnants may offer shelter to victims of the silence at some point, but to these people, the imposing steel looming overhead is merely a relic of the past. Alright, that actually changes a lot in my understanding of Iberia. Most of the nomadic cities, the aquatic nomadic cities, were not actually finished before this profound silence happened. I guess I was always under the assumption that they were just had a bunch of cities sailing around, but I guess not actually. Yeah, a couple, at the very least, but yeah, that really changes my image of Iberia. On to politics and military. The Inquisition. Iberia is currently ruled by the Inquisition, successor to the Church of Iberia. Under the guidance of Saint Carmen, the church experienced a comprehensive reorganization. Its former complicated system of lofty titles was replaced with a three-layer structure of Saint, High Inquisitor, Inquisitor. What local power structures still functioned were all incorporated into the central structure of the Inquisition. While Iberia still sees the titles of bishop and priest, it would be more accurate to call them grassroots civil administrators under the Inquisition than clergymen. Many times, these reciting sermon in the churches do not only offer spiritual consolation, but also an appealing manner for the people to obtain concrete guidance on matters involving both work and life. The Inquisition also unified former church doctrine and scripture by adapting, expanding, and refining them. Nowadays, these thick tomes have had a marked impact on the daily lives of Iberians. It is divine, and it is the foundation of their faith. It provides guidance, and it is a reference for their lives. It also restricts them, and is the basis for the laws that are enforced. The Inquisitor is the core of the Iberian Inquisition's power. The range of their duties and the range of applications for scripture are equally broad. An Inquisitor must be able to act as the spiritual leader and soothe the fear and doubt of the masses. They must act as judicial administrator and enforcer so as to stand against anything that might threaten Iberia. They must also act as a military commander, leading the penal battalion on coastal patrols, observing changes in the ocean, and containing the threat of the sea terrors are all duties of an inquisitor. It is unquestionable that the Inquisition's rule over Iberia involves many things that are subject to criticism, such as the serious lack of adherence to procedure or their extreme methods. But as the ultimate solution to handling urgent issues, these means can be considered understandable. As for whether the above facts have caused substantial abuse of power or chaotic management, that remains to be investigated. And here we have an Inquisitor's treasure. Scripture cannot substitute for the judgment she renders. She must seek out answers for herself. Sounds like Irene. And another excerpt. This Martinez guy really was interviewed a lot. Following the silence, a group of Iberians gathered each week in a Victorian coffee house. They called themselves the Post-Silence Recovery Group. They intended to eliminate the pain and sorrow left behind by the profound silence by mutual discussion. What they saw is often, or what they say, rather, is often rather exaggerated, and the truth is difficult to confirm, but nevertheless, their Victorian audience never doubts them. I jumped too soon. This is not Martinez, I guess. Another group. The calamity was caused by the sea monsters, wasn't it? Can't the Inquisition just stick to killing sea terrors? Why do they have to snatch away people as well? Por los Reyes, did someone you know get arrested? I'm truly, terribly sorry. No, do not worry. My friends and family are all well, but many will say things like anyone with a portrait of the king in his home was taken to the Inquisition's dungeons. Anyone caught admiring the ocean will be thrown into a cage and hanged by the deck. Frightful things to hear. How terrible. Thinking about a proud sailor being locked up on a little cage to die, unable to move despite floating on the ocean he once freely navigated. I dare not imagine the end to come of our fellows. I do not imagine the end to come of our fellows still in Iberia. You are not alone in this. No one could imagine such a thing. Who could have expected Iberia to seal herself off one day? The imagination and potential of the nation has been slain, and the lowliest of the lot have now placed themselves at the rudder. They will see all of us as low as them. You're right. We shouldn't throw our lives away in the nation half in the grave. Never mind all of that. You have got to try these Bolivarian coffee beans. Then at some point, a group photo of the Post-Silence Recovery Group members were published in Victorian newspapers and magazines. Their words were transcribed into true accounts and adapted into documentaries. After that, they were seen moving from the small coffee house to Londinium's most luxurious pub. Well, the storm might be coming. A little later than thought, so I thought maybe it wouldn't, but... we shall see. If it lasts. How much more do we have of Iberia? Very close to finishing Iberia. Nope, they've got a subsection. They got a subsection. Everyone's got a little subsection. Well, administrative division. Even those elderly folk who had experienced the Golden Age for themselves find it difficult to distinguish the various domains of the nobles on a map. Those former provinces have been forgotten, just like how their masters faded away into obscurity. Iberia does not currently have a need for administrative subdivisions other than the nomadic cities that survive the silence. There are only a few small, naturally formed post-silent settlements scattered across the wastes. Since the church and its inquisitorial successor led the reconstruction of Iberia, many new settlements are centered around a church or a courthouse. I don't think we've seen like an Iberian nomadic city still functioning. I can't imagine there's a lot of people left. Unless Grand Faro is nomadic. I don't think Grand Faro is nomadic, though. So, we've not seen like an actual active Iberian nomadic city. Military. Iberia's military draws from two main systems: the Iberian Defensa and the Penal Battalion. The Iberian Defensa has witnessed the kingdom's former glory. It was formed from ancient mercenary guilds located in various towns and cities. Officers appointed by the royal family and the nobility would hire mercenaries to form their armies, and their deep wallets would buy them the service of well-trained soldiers. Before the silence, Iberia's largest mercenary guild could even sustain an entire training fleet. And briefly, before we go to the next page, an artifact of an inquisitor, this lantern. There is no tombstone inscribed with any of their deeds at the inquisitor's grave. A rusted lantern is the only proof of their existence. After the silence, the royals and nobles no longer had the funds to maintain their military power. Even their standing armies were, for the most part, disbanded. Once neatly ironed uniforms began to appear among bandit groups roving the wastes, but that's all one word technically. Once neatly ironed uniforms began appearing among bandit groups roving the wastes, but there were still soldiers who maintained their honor. That's a weird sentence, but yeah, okay. In the north of Iberia, which got off comparatively lightly, those defensas defending the nomadic cities along the border never deserted their posts. The inland nations started to send messengers, investigation teams, and mercenaries one after another to Iberia as it sank into the silence. Perhaps these people were delighted in the Iberians' misfortune, or perhaps they felt trepidation. No matter their thoughts, they were all quelled by the patrolling defensa. After the reorganization of the church into the Inquisition, these soldiers were allowed to inherit the ancient name of the Iberian defensa and continue to answer threats stemming from outside Iberia. The Inquisition also established another armed force, the Penal Battalion. This battalion mostly consists of youths born after the profound silence. They have not witnessed the era of glory, and they are unaware of how to dress formally or display their medals. But when facing danger, they are well aware of how to behead sea terrors or burn away nether sea brand. The Inquisition did not only establish the Penal Battalion to uphold domestic order, but to face disasters anew from the ocean. The Penal Battalion organizes its troops into companies, each under the leadership of an inquisitor. They rush about between the inhabited regions of Iberia, maintaining order as they guard against infiltration by the Church of the Deep. Alongside this, they also monitor the ocean and resist any invasion by the evil lurking within its depths. Despite the name, I guess there's not anything to do with actually being prison-based? I figured it was made up of prisoners, but they didn't mention that. Why is it called the Penal Battalion then? I don't know. Weird. Guess I'll read this so-called Inquisitor thing first. Combat skills and command experience alone are not enough for a soldier of the Penal Battalion to be selected as an Inquisitor. Before every Inquisitor can assume the role, they must find their own answers to the following questions. Why do I wish to judge? What do I wish to judge? To become an Inquisitor is to discard softness, confront fear, hand down sentences, and perpetuate atrocity. It is true that one need not much reason to justify the blood on one's hand, or much less self-reflection, to believe that one is upholding justice. In the wake of the profound silence, many of Iberia's Aegir found themselves swinging from a rope hoisted by their former friend and neighbors. Embodiment of this truth, but few are able to sustain this throughout their entire lives. When anger and hatred cool as they walk in the endless road, people may suddenly be conscious of how insignificant, ridiculous, and irrational they are. Only those of unerring faith and resolve can follow the path of the Inquisitor for long. This is the belief of Iberia's Inquisition, at the very least. This idea is embodied in an Inquisitor's signature equipment. Their lantern and hand cannon may rely on Orangenium arts to operate, but there are significant differences between these and the ordinary staff and gun. While they do require skill and talent to use, the Inquisition's training regimen emphasizes a tenacious will and an unwavering conviction. If you yourself are afraid and hesitant How can your sword cut away the sins of man? How can your lantern deter the evils of the sea? Inquisitor's guidance for their apprentice. Culture and society. In the past, Iberians were always seeking novel experiences, but now they treat both old and new with reticence. Unfamiliar faces frighten them. Even if one was able to bypass the locked-down Iberian border, all that would greet them would be no more than a few doubtful glances. However, not even a familiar face would put an Iberian at ease. They would not know if these former friends had fallen to heresy or not, and they fear heretical accusation by the Inquisition, no matter what the truth may be. In such turmoil, recitations organized by the Inquisition are one of the few things that can calm the mind. Many Iberians start the day listening to these teachings. The attitude of the average Iberian regarding the cultural legacies that survived the end of the Golden Age is complicated. There are those who hate them, yet there are those who look to them with hope. There are those harmed by them, yet there are those who depend on them for survival. The fickle behavior of the people is like a great clamor, a vivid contrast to the deathly quiet brought by the profound silence. There once was a shopkeep dealing in pre-silence antiques, who was burned to death alongside his store by a mob. However, 2 years later, many laid flowers within the blackened ruins, holding back tears as they dug through the shattered bricks, desperately trying to retrieve any surviving memories. Iberia has lost her liveliness for a thriving artistic scene, though Iberians are wont to spontaneously create ordinary yet much-needed folk art. Many no longer dare to go out to sea. Yet the once marine culture has managed to find another way to pass itself down. The songs that people sang as they rebuilt their homes were mostly adapted from sea shanties. Most of those who still had a taste for exploration joined the Inquisition, where they could go on missions to reclaim forgotten lands and technology. In addition, Iberia's martial traditions have fared better than its maritime ones. The Inquisition even encourages its citizens to learn swordsmanship. Perhaps the hope is that if disaster strikes once more, every Iberian can raise a sword to defend themselves. Conclusion. Discovering Iberia. A few years ago, I happened to catch an interview on the television. On the screen, being interviewed was none other than the organizer of the post-silence recovery group that I met in that coffee shop decades back. It appears that he has become a rather popular author in Victoria lately. Reporter. Your most recent book doesn't mention Iberia at all. It's all about Victoria. Many readers have had their doubts, I'm afraid. We'd like to know if you still have interest in your native land. Author. Naturally, I've never forgotten that I'm Iberian myself, as you know. It's incredibly difficult to get any information about Iberia, but I can say that without a doubt I have always done my best to try and explore what it means for me to be Iberian. Everyone at home can look forward to me using new viewpoints to see my own Iberianness from a different angle, and they'll soon discover Iberia once more. After turning off the television, I thought back to Mr. Martinez's question, what is Iberia, and where has she gone? The profound silence was decades ago, yet people still talk about trying to discover Iberia, whether they are within or without its borders. Whether they seek solace or profit, Iberia once relied on its thirst for exploration and grand discoveries to shock Terra, but now it has become the target of exploration and discovery itself. As for what Iberia is, many voices will give many answers. These answers in turn form many people's understandings of their own identities. It is disaster like the profound silence approached once more. Could these understandings and answers allow the people to unite together and withstand it crashing down upon them? And then we have the Silenced Edict. Near the close of the 20s of this century, I left Litania for Iberia, far from the fires of war. There I called upon the royal capital of real Iberia as a visiting scholar. At the time, Iberia boasted an extremely sophisticated nationwide broadcast system, even though the royal family stated it would only be used to announce major affairs due to high maintenance and usage costs. In the age where recording technology had just appeared, this system would undoubtedly leave anyone seeing it for the first time with their jaws on the floor. Even now, we cannot ascertain the principles it functioned upon, much less replicate them. Before I returned to Victoria, the Iberian Royal Academies of Science and Technology gave me and some other visiting scholars an unusual receiver terminal each. They promised us that when this technology was fully developed and was ready to be implemented across all of Terra, they would share it with every nation of this great land. There would no longer be geographical barriers then, and all humanity could communicate instantaneously. We have looked forward to that day ever since, but none could anticipate that on the 28th of June, 1038, Golden Iberia would sound her final crescendo. The entire edict was as follows. So Iberia was trying to create global communication. I, Fernando Alejandro Ruiz de la Castro Torres, Real Iberia de Leitron, King of the Iberians and the Aegir, Sovereign of Iberia, Suzerain of all the seas, Master of all ships, cities, and ports, Defender of all trade, merchants, and explorers, Liege to all lords and nobles, Conquistador of the land and the sea, do hereby proclaim from the royal capital of Real Iberia. To my son, Prince Gonzalez, alongside all of Iberia's royal family, to all her nobles and all her bishops and all her general officers, to all the governors of her cities and ports, all her officers of the law, to every kind, pious, brave citizen in the realm, as well as all persons or groups of persons who might hear this proclamation. You are all well aware, or at least should be, that our nation faces the most unprecedented time. The sudden descent of violent weather and geological shifting has damaged every corner of this country to differing extents. We detected unusual oceanic behavior alongside a temporary communication breakdown in parts of the nation. We have also lost connection to several ports and cities. We now know that all this unusual activity is a deliberate provocation on Iberia, an atrocity against human civilization. The perpetrator is none other than Terra's ocean. It has cast off its gentle and kind facade of several centuries, exposing its true savage, ferocious nature. It hates us for our lands, bounteous and rich. It hates the civilization of man upon the land itself. It treats us with contempt. It pollutes our soil. It violates every tenet of our civilization. Iberia enjoys the most supreme glory upon this great land of Terra. We should be the bastion of order. We should be the aegis of civilization. We should resist all evil, no matter how formidable, no matter from whence it stems. I will not countenance any harm to my people, nor any defilement of our land, for I will allow any threat, nor will I allow any threat to our nation or to civilization itself run rampant. Always have we remembered your solemn vows to the Golden Throne. Always have we remembered that the duty, the calling of the royal family, is to protect all who seek protection from us and all good people who are in peril. We will protect this treasured grand civilization of ours, the one we built with our own hands. In these extraordinary times, in our darkest hour, I decree that the officers of the law of every city and port must by all means ensure the safety of the citizens under their purview. The priests of every diocese and every church must by all means suppress the evil that seeks to do harm to our nation. All the military officers are to bring our full might to bear and push back the waves encroaching on our land. All our fleets are to do all they can to wipe out the culprits who hide behind or beyond dry land, even if it means me proclaiming that Terra's sea-ridden seas must be scored clean after further consideration. Our lighthouses will shine as they ever did, and the Golden Armada has weighed anchor. These turbulent times will soon pass, our victory is close at hand, now ere the light of dawn, and oaths we swore to one another shine brighter than the stars. They are more resolute than land, more powerful than the ocean itself. Even if my body is not by your side, my thoughts will always be with you. I, King Ferdinando Alejandro I, will issue another proclamation in 12 hours. In these trying times, we must all believe in this one truth. Iberia will not be defeated. Iberia will triumph. Iberia will endure forevermore. Less than an hour after the king's edict, the weak signal coming from the royal capital terminated. All sound had fallen into silence, and Iberia spoke no more. Dang. I mean, that's a pretty good speech. It seems like they were gonna try, but an hour afterwards, the royal family just, or the capital just completely fell. Cool speech, though. And fittingly, next is Aegir. I wonder what Erikson's going to be able to say about Aegir. It's, the formatting is very different and also extremely text-heavy. Oh my goodness. Just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. And then Yerrig. Wow. Not a single picture, which I guess makes sense. Take a water break and see how this thunder's not been too bad, but we'll see. Wait it out a moment and see what happens. Be right back. we're back. Looks like the worst of it is passing by in the next 30 minutes. So I think we're going to push through. It's only going to get better from here. A-gear. What are these? Is this like another Briagan like section? Because Briagan was very long-winded in his descriptions before. It's crazy that a country we have a country we have some of the least information on and somehow has the most information in this book. Erikson, how does that work? Can't even put like pictures of mainland A-gear or anything. Oh, anyway. Tales of A-gear from under the table. After many years of wandering hither and thither, the materials I needed from Iberia have finally made their way into my hands. One can just barely see from the remaining pages of these notes that the paper used was once thick, smooth, and of high quality. According to my trustee in Iberia, the reason why these notes now look so dilapidated is because they have undergone some incredibly rough treatment. It is unknown what happened to the writer in the wake of the profound silence. His deserted dwelling was quickly ransacked. As the thief was tallying his booty, he barely even noticed the notes, which he had simply tossed into his sack during his plundering, without a second thought. He even left them behind when going to the pawn shop to fence his ill-gotten goods, and so this bundle of notes containing many tales of A-gear was split in two, half to cover up a hole in the wall, half to brace a wobbly table. These are documents of A-gear as written by some random Iberian author, recovered by a thief, who then gave it to someone else at some point, I guess, and got in the hands of E. Erikson. All right. Picture of A-gear city underwater. Don't know how I got that. Guess Rhodes Island. Although, I don't think we would have had a picture of that by the time this book was published, but whatever. I shan't question it. So, Flesh and Soul, number 1. I feel like the focus is out for some reason. Let me see about adjusting that. There we go. Probably a lighting thing. Obviously, we've lost some of the natural lighting. Just have the studio lighting now. So, flesh and blood. The alloyed cup and saucer set glimmered, red. A small worm awakens from dormancy within a vial, slowly extending the scale-like structures of its body to reveal a set of minute gland pores. I don't think worms have scales. Though it is a sight he sees 6 times a day, he always watches the nurse robot with rapt attention, observing the way it inserts the needle into the worm's pores to extract its ichor. The way it inserts the needle into his veins to inject that ichor. Traces of deep blue suddenly wind their way through his twisted veins, causing him to feel a sense of strangeness, perhaps even monstrosity. It is at times like this when a question unique to him would occasionally make its way through his mind. How should a man confront a disease ravaging his body? As a consul of the Academy of Sciences Institute of Social Planning, Oculatus rarely pondered issues from his own perspective. Ever since the sages quelled the flames of war and brought the city-states of the Aegir into an alliance, wisdom has overtaken violence as the accepted tool of governance. For the next 1,000 years, Aegir society followed strict plans which were drafted into one of the cardinal institutions of the Academy of Science, the Institute of Social Planning, ISP. Only after passing through the close scrutiny and consideration of every consul in the Academy of Sciences and Technology did Oculatus's plan finally become the guideline of society over the entire city. He had to consider everything from the standpoint of absolute objectivity. There was no room for subjectivity in his thoughts, and so he became an ordinary puppet upon the board in an abstract existence watching the entire game from above. Okay, so this is actually some serious documentation of Aegir society. Also, I guess Aegir did have wars at one point among themselves and then were united. Didn't know that. Thought they were always united. I mean, this alone should have made this book extremely famous in academia to have information on Aegir. Because this would have come out before Aegir announced itself. But apparently this book didn't do that well. Footsteps coming from the corridor interrupted his thoughts. Oculatus perked up his ears. Soft-soled shoes made from diatomaceous composites, which created a soft, dragging sound with every considerable, agile step. What is diatomaceous? I don't know. Let's find out. It's a type of mineral. Diatomaceous earth also known as diatomite, is a sedimentary rock made from silica. There you go. Where was I? Why has she come? Was it to protest? She has already raised complaints 3 times in 2 days, barely changing her arguments every time. If that really was the case, it would be easier to send a robot to reply her voice, he thought. He focused on the sound of footsteps gradually approaching, and before the arriver could speak, he made his thoughts clear. Political discussions should wait until the meeting tomorrow. Consuls from the cardinal institutes of both academies will be present. As for the questions of feasibility in regards to sci-tech, the scientific and technologies IDPs will give their feedback separately. Should you discover any irrationalities on the social level in your capacity as consul of the Institute of Societal and Administrative Supervision, you should raise the issue in the discussions tomorrow. I guess this is still technically fiction. It reads like it's more like a fiction story, but it is accurate. A water capsule is placed in front of him, and it begins to roll down the desk's incline. He has no choice but to put his terminal aside and catch it in his hands. The icy water shocks his senses, forcing him to be distinctly aware of his corporeal body. You misunderstand me, Consul. I'm simply here to give you some water. Aurelia's crisp voice dazes him for a moment. She would always pull these little tricks of hers to derail his train of thought. While he did not dislike this excessively chatty colleague of his, he did not enjoy the interruption of his thought process. Just as an engineer hopes that every line he draws will become reality, he fears seeing those lines suddenly jump out of the screen to sting him. I assumed you had a more suitable reason than that, not to mention that my nurse robot manages my diet. If you wished to give me water, you could have sent your own robot to do it. See, we are in agreement on what needs a human touch and what can be left to machines. Which means you are now all ears as to why I'm handing you this water in person, but now you're not content with returning the ecology control system to human hands. You also want to conduct human modification for this purpose, right? The system's monitor units have been laid out with a 50-kilometer diameter stretch of water. It should be able to autonomously handle any invasive species bearing complete system failure. Whenever engaged in conversation, Oculatus often feels the effects of his old age. In A gear, every inflexible, repetitive, mind-numbing task was taken up by machinery. Everything requiring flexibility, free-form thinking, and creativity was handled by humanity. How could he not understand this? The one who pushed for the detailed labor division between human and machines in the city several decades ago was his younger self. The younger generation has already forgotten his past contributions. What brings him impatience now is not his achievements fading away, but the language he uses has begun to show a deficiency. As a consul of the ISP, he has prided himself on his rhetorical eloquence his entire life. Even a fellow consul such as Aurelia has dismissed the Seaborn as yet another invasive species, how could he explain to the Aegir residents of the city the terrifying prospects he sees in them? It seems we must discuss this once again. My answer has not changed. I will elaborate in detail the threat of the Seaborn pose in tomorrow's meeting. I cannot show you the data in advance, but I can tell you the conclusions. First, the Seaborn are an entirely new life form, unable to be simply classified as an invasive species. Second, the ecology control system's autonomous behavior will not only not be able to clear them away, but will instead induce characteristics in the Seaborn we would not wish to see. You want to throw away several centuries worth of taxonomical analysis to declare some ordinary seagrass meadow pests an entirely new form of life? You want to let the populace think our current technology unable to stop them in any way, shape, or form, to the point that you believe we have no choice but to break the taboo on human modification? I know exactly what I am doing. Since the Seaborn were able to evolve at a ridiculous pace in just a few short months, so too must Aegir's citizens undergo a radical change in our cognition in the limited time we have. Ocelotus emphasized the word Aegir. As he finished speaking, he narrowed his eyes, watching minute traces of apprehension creep up Aurelia's face. In the Aegir language, Aegir itself was the strongest of words, forever bound to positivity in its meaning. In all these hundreds of years, no one else dared to say that there are things that the Aegir cannot do, and so the moment Aurelia tries to protest that Aegir citizens wouldn't be able to change so drastically, so immediately, she intuitively cuts off her own words. For a moment, Ocelotus felt somewhat relaxed, for it seemed someone had finally begun to understand him. It had taken him longer to accept it when he first realized the rate at which Aegir invented new technologies and could not outpace the adaptive speed of the Seaborn. But Aurelia quickly recovered, her stance yet firm, her words yet fierce. Even if the change in cognition you envision could be realized, it would be followed by uncontrollable ripples through society. Which is why social planning includes leeway for such unforeseen events. Oppression is the foundation of turmoil, and we have long since eliminated it. Whatever small-scale fluctuations remain are insufficient to affect the order of the society. I do not know what this so-called human modification of yours entails, but I do not believe its impact should be called small-scale. How would you convince the citizens that those who undergo these modifications are still human? If we are able to reach a consensus during tomorrow's meeting, the scientific IDP will immediately begin their research. When the time comes, we will enjoy the support of accurate theoretical data. I can at least tell you that what this study hopes to see, the consciousness of the participant should not be influenced in any way. The sole purpose of this genetic adjustment would be to bring the body's strength up to required levels. The people of Aegir have always relied on spontaneous creativity to resolve their issues. Since when did we have to bring people up to required levels? Her pointed question leaves Ocelotus at a loss for words once more. His relief from being understood was but a fleeting one. Maintaining his posture exhausted him. He sinks into his chair, the so-called ergonomic structure pressing against his waist, preventing him from sinking too deep. Aurelia's youthful figure stood ramrod straight as ever, causing him to feel somewhat isolated. He has lived too long a life, long enough that even Aegir's medical technology cannot perfectly eliminate everything that ails him. He often feels that his mind and body were being separated. His thoughts ever more complex, his flesh ever more dead weight. Most other Aegir of his age accepted euthanasia and passed away. Only he still lashes himself to his post. He fears he has not yet been fully understood. There was always more to say, more to do. As a highly respected science consul, he remained in his office year after year, but those who understood him have dwindled in number. Now he must compel his broken body to explain himself once more. Perhaps I should word it another way. The genetic adjustments will not transform the participants in any specific matter. Instead, they will make up for their body's deficiencies, allowing them to pursue whichever stratagems they envision to the fullest degree, just as how we provide treatment to the sick or prosthetics to the disabled. I understand your frustrations you have with your body, but I do not believe your comparison holds water. The sick and disabled require healing, true, but what deficiencies in a healthy person are so lacking that they require transformation to make up for? You speak as though not discussing the human body, but a machine requiring maintenance. If you truly believed in the worth of humanity, you wouldn't be talking about modifying the body into something else. If one were to look back on Alcalculatus' words, one would see every sentence he utters separates discussion of the mind and the body, as if the mind were the foundation of humanity, while the body is not more than flesh to be handled how one pleases. He has come to realize his words are no longer congruent with his thoughts, and in truth it scares him. There is no other Aegir who longs for a healthy, vigorous body more than he, no other one who values unity of body and mind more. Man is not a machine to be loaded with software. This is the most deep-seated opinion of countless Aegir. One that has stood for thousands of years. In that age, the ancestors of the Aegir flowed into the sea via the waterways. Man did not yet understand his body well at the time, and as they listened to the echoes reverberating in the depths of their chests, they attributed it to some sort of mysterious existence living within, and so people gave their forms meaning. Creations of the gods, masterpieces of nature, vagaries of faith, extensions of reason. These meanings coalesced into emotions: veneration, admiration, affection, adoration. Then man discovered legacy buried within the seabed, an unending, inexhaustible font of knowledge and technology. Rapid, scientific development led people to realize that there was nothing mysterious about the existence of humanity. The body is but a gathering of myriad cells, and so they were mired in self-doubt. What meaning is there in what is objectively a collection of cells? What provokes emotion within us when pondering it? These doubts were the center of protracted debate, until one sage raised questions that would influence later generations for millennia to come. Why can a person be the bearer of meaning or the source of emotion, but not a cell? What is so special about scientific terminology and technical terms that they must be separated from all subjective forms of thought? And so science shed its veil of mystique and majesty henceforth. People no longer worship at the altar of scientific achievement, but neither have they been thoroughly deconstructed into meaningless gatherings of cells. The heart is but an organ pumping blood, and consciousness is merely the result of brain activity, but humanity is by no means a race of organic machines. These precise systems, formed from organs, cells, even elementary particles, hold a value that cannot be shaken. Visual art incorporating the human body as a central motif arose at this time, and discovering the beauty of the human form became an important creative endeavor, for such endeavors are the sole way to preserve one's humanity. No, I certainly do not have such thoughts. the worth of humanity. At this point, Oculatus has lost all thoughts of maintaining his composure. All he wants is for Aurelia to understand him. In his panic, he glances at the aquarium to the side. A bloated pink organism drifts within, its tens of stubby tube feet incessantly flailing about to propel itself forward with minimum dignity. A glimpse of this awkward, ugly life form is all he needs to find his words once more. Do you happen to know what this is? Beta scale subgland platonic pseudoscalid myriapod, a hybrid animal whose larval secretions have medical value. Indeed, the recycling bin by his hand is filled with discarded pharmaceutical packages, every vial containing a dried-out corpse of a larva. Once extracted, the secretions quickly lose their potency and are difficult to preserve, and so each dose is stored within a larva's body and its packaging used as needed, and then thrown away. In comparison, its adult form is worthless, with no value to pharmaceuticals in the slightest, nor is there any use for them in artificial breeding programs. In short, there should not be any adults in this world. Then why is there one in your aquarium? A request I put in to the Institute of Biological Research. It may be the only adult of its kind. I raise it only as a reminder to myself. The value of these creatures is determined solely by us, all because we have the ability to break the boundaries between species with gene editing technology. Do you know what else has the ability to break these boundaries? The Seaborn. If we want to discuss the worth of humanity, we must first ensure the power to judge that worth is firmly within our grasp. Only we can recognize our own values. All we are proud of is worthless in the eyes of the Seaborn. His lengthy, impassioned speech leaves him breathless, but the expression he hoped to see is not there. What lies on her face is nearly pity. Even if I believe in your respect for humanity, I still cannot accept the modifications to our body. The method you chose runs counter to your original intent. Moreover, and do forgive me for going on at length, but you cannot keep using your own illness and medication as an example. Aegir society will need a more official reason. Every rational argument would have only served to entrench him further in his ways, but this one minor piece of pitying advice causes him to waver. As a council of the Academy of Sciences Institute of Social Planning, he has had to consider everything from a standpoint of absolute objectivity. There is no room for subjectivity in his thoughts, but now Oculatus begins to reflect on things. Was he allowing his hate for his illness and his longing for health affect his work? Was he too focused on how to keep dragging along his ailing flesh to the point that he decided that Aegir needed to save it was the modification of the human body? The meeting on the second day was never held. Right before it was to begin, the participants discovered that Science Consul Oculatus had tendered his resignation. His vision for human modification was never discussed openly, and only a select few, including Technology Consul Aurelia, were aware of his wild fantasy. 10 or so years later, the situation in Aegir worsened, and a plan to modify the human body was proposed by another consul. This time it was approved, and so began the Abyssal Hunter program. Really fun read. And a good look into the Aegir's pro-humanity mindset there. Human purism, even. Because they see themselves as the inheritors of the predecessors. change the album real quick. And the focus, since it just keeps changing. So number 2, life and death. Yeah, I don't know if that is like actual transcript or fiction of real events. I'm not sure what these are supposed to be. Erikson doesn't say what these are supposed to be. It reads like fiction, but it is true events, like, especially at the end, like the Abyssal Hunter program is genetic modification. That was very contentious. So, yeah, I mean, they're real events, but might be a bit traumatized. I don't know. Life and death. The metal box begins to tremble faintly in the air. The information retrieval module is about to finish loading. Your autopsy report and health records present themselves before you. You float within the half-sealed vertical glass bathtub, paler than the withered plant in your room, like driftwood that has spent eons out at sea. The brightly colored, long-beard, comb-toothed grass sprouts out of your chest, and its many tentacles, lined with numerous photophore, spread out beneath the water to form a scarlet starry sky. Veins stand erect over the water like sentries, quivering as they search for the photographer's lens. This art you have left behind is alive. As I look at it, so too does it look back at me. If I did not know this was a picture of your suicide, I would not have thought myself myself scrutinizing a painting record is within the system. I would not have thought myself painting your suicide note was but a single sentence, and you did not even record it within the system. Instead, you opted for the wall. I have stranded many alongside me upon this meaningless, desolate coast. Why would you think so? Even after your death, the plants you reared are still beautiful. Every specimen, the definition of elegance, as though they read about your pursuit of beauty from your blood. Search complete. The deceased Florence had no incurable medical conditions when alive. She did not meet the requirements for euthanasia. According to the autopsy report, she committed suicide. Suicide, a most unfamiliar word. The reason why Aegir can face death so calmly and accept euthanasia when on its door, the reason why Aegir can face death so calmly and accept euthanasia when on its door, whether due to age or illness, is because we have created adequate value when we are alive. To walk peacefully into the night is to affirm your life. But in the past 100 years or so, there have been none who wanted to cut off their life early like you did. Suicide, the clearest of rejections. You were an excellent child with outstanding talents. What caused you to have no other choice? I cannot begin to guess. All I can do is reflect over my own thoughts. Search complete. My condolences. It seems that no matter what, this assistant robot is compelled to add words. Search complete. Polite remarks are no exception. I ask myself this. Did I grieve for you, even for a moment? Am I a child rearer at the Institute of Incubation? And you are one of my former wards. After 12 years, you left to join the Academy of Technology's Institute of Ecological Art to further your studies and work. If there were any who could acknowledge your worth, it would have been your colleagues there. They were the closest to you. The ties that bind are determined not by blood or by family, but by those that see the value in you. Now you return without warning, all to destroy my own. My entire life's work in this institute, doing the work I so love. For decades I have received custody of countless children from their parents. If I close my eyes, I can still see the relief on the parents' faces and the expectant gazes of the children. The Institute of Incubation has freed Aegir from the shackles of family life, something I ardently believed prior to your death. But you chose such an ironic way to commit suicide, planting the long-beard comb-toothed grass into your chest. Why that plant, the first I gave you? If it was my rearing that led you down this dead end, then you should have filed a complaint that allowed me the chance at a formal ruling. Search complete. The deceased Florence suffered from chronic insomnia in life. Her most severe bout left her awake for 3 days. Insomnia. Yet another unfamiliar term. The assistant robot performed a full database search, but only managed to retrieve a single uninteresting document that briefly mentioned it. The author was a rather free-spirited surveyor. 53 years ago, he was a one-man survey team with a self-developed land detector, stepping ashore onto the land that no one else cared for. He described the land dwellers' insomnia thusly. Their mechanized labor is rare, and the concept of family still holds strong. A person's day is roughly split into 3, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for aspects of life, and 8 hours for sleep. However, their work in life is filled with meaningless repetitiveness. 8 hours performing the same work over and over during the day, then at night they say the same pleasantries, cook the same meals, take care of the same odds and ends as they did the previous day. Thanks to these banalities, they must often use time allocated to sleep to do what truly holds meaning for them. A pity, is it not? In our work in our lives, the creation of value and our self-actualization are one and the same. They are not stripped of meaning through rote work, and we need not rely on family for approval. The causes we strive for are grand enough. The lives we live are fulfillment enough. What did you desire so that you felt the need to spend your nights making up for your days? Search complete. The deceased Florence would create art during the night. Her home is filled with withered and dying plants, most of them subjects of gene editing and form manipulation. They may be her works of ecological art. From May of this year onwards, she no longer gave her abandoned drafts to recycling, but instead allowed them to rot away at home. Yes. You've always been blessed, or been obsessed. I'm just making up words now. Yes, you've always been obsessed with this since you were a child. Whenever the other children argued over the printer and the video terminal, or when they played with model toys or biomimetic pets, you'd instead tend to the plants, arranging them in fascinating ways. Afterwards, you would learn how to make them grow in certain directions and breed your own ornamental breeds, once with stems shaped like golden spirals or flowers strewn with stars. I always had hope for your burgeoning talent in art creation and the sole method to maintain your humanity, and among all the ways to create, art is the most enlightening. A necessity in inspiring the minds and spirits of the populace. You became an outstanding artist, as I hoped, the core of the Academy of Technology. What high wall blocked you so that you no longer made new work, that you allowed your hundreds of drafts to rot away? Search complete. The deceased Florence received many projects from other institutes in the past 6 months, helping fill manpower shortages at the Institute of Biological Research and Institute of Environmental Control. Her final project was breeding a hybrid plant containing special neurons to monitor and report on changes to the environment caused by the seaborn. Now it is my image of you that has become unfamiliar. It is rare for people who love their work to wish to leave, and out of everyone I know, you were the one who loved their work the most. You even toiled away in your greenhouse for months on end, with barely any rest. All to see your seeds sprout and plants grow with your own eyes. What would make you set aside your life's work so you get tangled up in the other's affairs? Search complete. These other projects stemmed from Florence's spontaneous applications, and their core concepts were also suggested by her. The technological IDP's consul highly appreciated her enthusiasm and creativity, and approved her applications. From the point onwards, she held 2 jobs, producing her own work while breeding species for these extra projects. The Florence I remember returns. You always did have a narrow view of the world. Anything within it that was your obsession, anything outside of it you barely thought of. You hoped your world would be perfect. Any leaf with the slightest flaw would be pruned, even if it was only a near imperceptible curling or yellowing. Clippings of branches and leaves are always floating in your waterbed. How much time did you spend fiddling with them? The children of the Institute of Incubation are siblings, while us child rearers were the parents. We should have loved one another equally, but I was the adult you wished to be closest to. Perhaps it was because I understood your pursuit for perfection the most. Even if they had a myriad pre-made paints at their disposal, painters of repute must still mix the colors they picture in their minds. Did you not seek such lofty heights too? I wanted to apply for lab-grade equipment for you. No matter how many procedures I would have had to wade through. Your eyes had widened much these past few years. If you had begun to pursue perfection in other domains, they must have been drawn into your sights. Search complete. The hybrid plants cultivated by the project were swiftly assimilated by the Seaborn after they were released into the environment. The 3 technicians on duty at the monitoring station failed to secure the data in time and were also assimilated. The Sea Patrol unit was forced to liquidate them immediately after arriving on the scene. The Institute of Environmental Control's database briefly crashed. Most of the data is recoverable, but the extent of the leak is unknown, and it's unclear whether the Seaborn can access or use the leaked information. The project has been cancelled, and Florence was questioned by the Academy of Technology before her passing. Seaborn. Ever since the Sea Patrol's fleet suffered its first loss in centuries, these creatures have brought far too many imperfections. Yet they are but a fleeting disaster, and we will undoubtedly achieve a glorious victory in the end. What if you could wait just a little longer? What if you could look a bit further ahead? An Aegir may face challenges beyond their individual strength, but Aegir as a whole can solve any problem. Not every imperfection must be eradicated by your own hand. Why was I unable to teach you such a simple truth? Perhaps the sad truth is that I was not worthy enough to teach you that. Some things can remain broken, while others must be flawless. Aren't we all weighed down by the obsession? If not for this, if not for the desire to examine whether my life's work had developed hidden imperfections, I wouldn't have troubled myself to investigate your death. Search complete. According to standard procedure, the director of the Institute of Environmental Controlling must indeed face inquiries. However, due to the project's significant impact on Aegir's national security, the Consul has the authority to question any personnel involved with the project. Though not officially part of the Institute of Environmental Controlling, Florence played a key role in the project's execution and is therefore obligated to cooperate fully with the investigation and all crises response work. Search complete. At the industry level, the number of people working in artistic fields has been steadily declining. Many major arts institutes have been repeatedly downsizing their staff, and the Institute of Ecological Art is no exception. Although the number of art exhibits and events has remained stable, participation has declined, while the average age of attendees has increased significantly. Search complete. On a personal level, Florence's output has steadily declined in recent years, with her artwork receiving mixed reviews. She also serves as a deputy director of the Institute of Ecological Art, and her administrative work has also been spotty lately. She submitted multiple requests to cancel this year's exhibition at the Institute or, at the very least, exclude her own artwork from it. Search complete. While sitting for the inquiry, Florence used the term stranded to describe both her new life and the plants that she had cultivated. Alive yet unable to create value. Unable to create value yet unable to die properly. We are stranded in a state that should not exist. Somewhere between life and death. Her statement sparked controversy and was deemed incompatible with the spirit of society. The old man stopped his search. He turned off the assistant robot and sank into his waterbed. He had halted his investigation before the weight of unease could engulf him. He had sensed something amiss. There was a subtle shifting happening in Aegir society. Florence, a poor, sensitive soul, was the first reflection of this change. He wasn't sure if he should feel relieved or afraid. Relieved because it seemed like Florence's suicide had nothing to do with him, and stemmed from something far more complicated. Or afraid, because he had no idea why the consuls of the two institutes would allow such change to occur in Aegir in the first place. At least his work still had meaning, he thought, and resolved to sleep. Tomorrow, he would welcome 2 new children, and he couldn't afford to drain too much energy beforehand. But moments later, he roused the assistant robot once again. What do you think? Why did she do it? What was the pressure of the inquiry? Artist's block? A loss of purpose? A disconnect with reality? Search complete. Thank you for using the little handy assistant robot's information retrieval module. Please note that this unit is only capable of retrieving existing information and cannot think as humans do. To prevent users from mistaking this unit's output for opinions, this unit will strictly adhere to the search complete format. We appreciate your understanding. So, despite everyone saying on the surface, the Seaborn aren't that big of a deal, we'll eliminate them eventually. The fact of the matter is, the Seaborn are an existential threat to life and civilization, and that is affecting Aegir society now. People are going less into the arts, which is the whole point of, like, human to the Aegir. That's the pinnacle of, like, human achievement and expression. Less people are going to the arts. Presumably, they are going into science and military stuff. if Aegir society is built upon people finding value in you and no relation with family or anything, right? Well, Florence lost that value, right? Art is on the decline. No one was liking her art. She was losing value there. Her creations were accidentally assimilated by the Aegir, or not by the Seaborn, which means that she inadvertently helped the Seaborn potentially evolve into a way that posed even more of a threat to her civilization. She was questioned for this. She lost value among her peers for that. So, like, yeah, she had fallen completely out of the principles of Aegir society. Which itself is falling out of it as a whole. Looks like we'll be able to finish the rest of Aegir today, which is good. Just, yeah. Make sure the focus is still fine. Looks as good as it can be. Number 3, Light and Shadow. I assume these are times. 8 o'clock. Oh yeah. It is now 8 a.m. on July 29th. Good morning, citizens of Herculaneum. Today, the air cycle is set to breeze, and the light heat control system is set to sunny. I am thrilled to announce that according to calculations by the Institute of Environmental Controlling, Herculaneum will experience its first natural volcanic eruption of the century at around 10 a.m. today. Mount Herculaneum is one of the largest energy reservoirs in the ocean. These days, most cities in the Aegir rely on hydrogen energy. However, geothermal energy was the first type of energy the Aegir learned to harness. Our beautiful city, Herculaneum, benefits from an ample natural resources and remain one of the few cities in the Aegir that still primarily uses geothermal energy. We have extracted over 300 energy wells within 5 nautical miles from the volcano. Each well is equipped with pressure boosters capable of generating lava flows equivalent to a small volcanic eruption, even during dormant periods. The wells contain a special liquid which, under 30 million PA of pressure, at high temperatures is converted into supercritical fluid. The electricity generated from this fluid accounts for 70% of Herculaneum's energy consumption. (9 a.m.) The official channel of the Institute of Environmental Controlling will broadcast a live multi-angle feed of the eruption. Those of you on break today may step outside and witness the spectacle firsthand. Protective eyewear has been distributed via optical cables to all nodes. You can collect them from your home or work terminals. The eyewear supports voice, gesture, and bioelectrical controls that includes features such as photography, video recording, 3D modeling, and data analysis. The city's light heat control system will temporarily shut down during the eruption to ensure the clearest possible view of the event. Sun Forger will pause operation and close temporarily. Visitors with reservations can reschedule their tours. Thank you for your understanding. As we marvel at the volcanic eruption, let us not forget to pay our highest respects to the great Volcanus. The heat-proof dome, designed under his leadership, is capable of withstanding up to Category 4 volcanic eruptions. Herculaneum will remain completely safe as it endures the release of hundreds of millions of cubic meter of volcanic material. During the eruption, the dome's color panels will also be temporarily disabled, allowing citizens to witness the true color of its heat shield. Is this about to go horribly wrong? What is about to happen? 9:47 a.m. Attention citizens. Due to data interference from an unknown source, the calculations reported earlier may have been incorrect. The intensity of disruption could exceed Category 4 and may reach as high as Category 7? How many categories are there? However, there is no need to panic. Even at Category 7 intensity, the heat-proof dome will hold for a sufficient amount of time. Herculaneum's emergency mobility protocols will be activated within the next 2 hours, during which the entire city will be safely moved out of the eruption's impact zone. Herculaneum operates on a hybrid mobility system that combines legs and propulsion units, trading speed for maximum stability. Currently, around 1/5 of Aegir cities use this system. Once the legs lift the city's base, the bottom propulsion units will keep the city aloft. Primary thrust will come from the main propulsion unit, while the legs assist with more complex maneuvers like speed adjustments, turning, and crossing difficult terrain. Under normal circumstances, the auxiliary thrusters on the city's flanks are used to keep the residential area stable and level. However, the city needs to move quickly, so we may be forced to repurpose some auxiliary thrusters to provide additional propulsion. This may cause shaking and turbulence. Public shelters have been opened for your protection. Additionally, quick charge protective films have been delivered to all nodes via fiber optic cables. Please collect yours promptly at your home or work terminal. When using the quick charge protective film, remove any heavy clothing and secure the film generator to your chest. To prevent accidental activation, it is recommended that all citizens switch to the control mode of the film generator to automatic. (10:02 a.m.) Attention! Unknown branch-shaped biological structures have emerged from the lava, accompanied by a large number of seaborne newborns. Legs 3 and 4, as well as the bottom thrusters, have suffered varying degrees of damage, and the seaborne have clogged the main thruster's combustion chamber. None of the seaborne have shown aggression yet. Repairs to the city's mobility systems are underway. All relevant agencies are taking necessary measures to eliminate the seaborne and restore the city's mobility. Attention! For safety reasons, we must evacuate everyone to designated safe zones outside the city. Please proceed immediately to the assigned evacuation points and board the escape ships in an orderly manner. The evacuation will be fully escorted by the Sea Patrol. We ask that all citizens remain calm and cooperate with the evacuation process. Dude, the seaborne were living in the volcano? The trap. Attention! All city gates have been opened and the evacuation fleet is ready to set sail. Essential personnel will remain at their posts and this channel will continue to broadcast updates. Please stay tuned for further information. 10:55. Leg 3 has been repaired. The main thruster is back online. There are no indications that the seaborne numbers are decreasing. Leg 1 has been immobilized by creeping branches. Massive collapse in the energy wells. Immediately initiate the mobility program and attempt to lift the city with the remaining legs. Citizens who have not yet evacuated, please proceed to the designated evacuation points immediately. 1203. To all my fellow citizens who have not yet evacuated, I extend you my deepest respect. The cleanup and repair operations are underway. Herculaneum will not fall. Our forebearers are with you. Aegir is with you. Well then. I hope it didn't fall. The Aegir at the circus. In the early 11th century, nearly 100 years after the first Aegir set foot on the shores of Iberia, the Iberian kingdom was at the height of its glory. People assassinations with strange and wondrous tales had overtaken their passions for exploration. Most Aegir who fled to Iberia lived in seclusion, yet they quietly introduced their advanced knowledge and technology into Iberian society. However, this structured knowledge and technology were beyond the Iberians' comprehension. They preferred to hastily strip things of their essence, turning them into exotic and bizarre forms of mental fast food. The owner of this notebook once worked for the Aegir Circus, and animal performance and freak shows were popular forms of entertainment in Iberia, but people had grown tired of seeing burden beasts walking upside down and tusk beasts balancing on seesaws. Even battles between malformed mangler beasts and two-headed gloom pinchers had lost their charm. Instead, people turned their attention toward rare treasures from the deep sea. Author's notes. After coming ashore, we quickly encountered the land dwellers. It was a small Iberian fin-catching village. Modest and poor, where the locals made their living by fin-catching and small trades. Despite their limited means, they kindly allowed us to stay in the village temporarily. After dinner, the children and the elders gathered around us. Sometimes they made awkward small talk, but other times they said nothing at all and just stared at us intently. This strange scene finally ended when one of our companions, as a gesture of gratitude, presented them with a gold inlaid pocket watch. Okay, so the author of all this is an Aegir. I guess I should have realized that. So those are like, it maybe... I wonder if their personal experiences, I mean, it's not, the two different people, like note 1 and note 2 were two different people. You could have been from Herculaneum, though. Interesting, okay. Within 2 days, someone came to us claiming to be a representative of the local nobility, asking if we could go with them. Most of the people in our group cautiously declined. They wanted to make contact with the Aegir who had previously come ashore, rather than be led by a few unknown land dwellers. Only a handful of people, including me, boarded the vehicle without really understanding the situation. The countries on land were livelier than I had imagined, but also more chaotic. As we passed through the market, the air was thick with the stench of dead things. A group of children in ragged clothing emerged out of crates from behind the cargo sheds and from under the eaves, shouting incoherently as they chased after us with like a pack of hungry sea-born newborns. They held up local smoked ham, distilled spirits from the land, and even seaborn-shaped handicrafts, most likely hoping to trade with us for a few valuable items. A large four-legged animal sniffed curiously at our vehicle, then turned and deposited a foul-smelling pile of dung on one of the wheels. Its owner laughed uncontrollably, hiccuping from drink. The noble representative leading the carriage drew his sword and cursed him in a language we couldn't understand, and the man slunk away in shame. After driving out of the maze of low houses, we arrived at a relatively tidy district. The air carried a different scent, one of burning tobacco and fresh paint that made us wrinkle our noses. The carriages stopped in front of an imposing mansion, and we were asked to wait at the entrance. After days of running around, we hadn't had a chance to rest, and our group was showing clear signs of fatigue. Someone quickly approached us. They pulled out a bottle of thick, blue-green liquid and presented it to us proudly. This is the prized drink that the Aegir consul drinks every day. 1 bottle will invigorate you, 2 will give you the strength of a burden beast, and 3 will make traveling by land or sea no problem at all. I waved my hand to decline, but he persisted. You must have come from the sea, right? After such a long journey, you must be exhausted. Are you sure you don't want to try it? I was surprised that while he knew I was an Aegir, he seemed completely unaware that Aegir had no such strange beverages. It looked more like the nutrient solution that the Institute of Biological Research used for plants. It's just fertilizer. Before long, the staff at the mansion invited us inside. We were greeted by a woman claiming to be of Iberian nobility with a lavishly dressed elderly Aegir following behind her. For most of the time, the noble woman remained silent, stroking a long-haired animal that constantly bared its teeth. The elderly Aegir handled most of the negotiations. He introduced us to the noble woman, reciting her excessively long and pompous title. After engaging in some small talk, mostly talking to himself, he expressed a desire to speak with us individually. I soon followed him out of the mansion and back into the chaotic open area outside. Dozens of cooked tents were set up, and wooden crates with tethered animals were scattered about. I saw a nearly 3-meter-tall giant with sharp black horns on its head, twisted into a grotesque posture and confined in a small wooden Kangi? Kong. Oh. Hold on, let me pull this up to describe this. I don't think about this very often. So I certainly did not know its name. But it's like the wooden thing that some people, like, I guess like prisoners or whatever, would be forced to wear on their heads. There you go. A Kong. Anyway, where was I? Small wooden Kong. I saw 2 withered figures, one human and one beast, curled up inside a large glass tank. Black crystals pierced through their skin, fusing them together into what resembled a conjoined creature. They looked at me in a way I have never seen before. The gelatinous orb in their eye sockets turned towards me, yet were devoid of any gaze. I couldn't even comprehend why they were moving their eyes. The elderly spoke much more plainly this time. He said that if I wished to live in a stable and prosperous life in Iberia, he was willing to show me the way, on the condition I agreed to use the knowledge and skills I brought from the sea to help with certain ventures. I As he spoke, he opened an intricately carved ashwood display cabinet, revealing an array of items ranging from household goods to decorative objects. Though the items vaguely resembled Aegir craftsmanship in shape, they were lacking any sense of artistry. After fiddling with the display for a moment, the elder pulled out a strange shell covered in the skin of some unknown animal and painted with a glossy gold lacquer. The shape of the shell resembled that of a sea-born species from the seabed, but the spindly spines on the shell clearly belonged to a different sea-born species. I later learned that the shell was indeed pieced together from the bones of various species of seaborn. Compared to other things I had seen on land in recent days, it almost seemed ordinary, yet I still struggled to understand why it was in there. Having just arrived, you should start with something simple. Perhaps you can help us present it at the Circus Freak Show. I was a bit confused. As a writer, my knowledge of the Seaborn is limited to what I learned in school, but before I could fully express my concerns, the elder impatiently waved his hand. You know, not everyone can sit through an Aegir-style academic presentation. What we need from you are some interesting stories about the Seaborn. This piece of being sold as a collectible, and it needs a sufficiently novel origin to fetch a good price. Aegir had not developed a systematic method for classifying the Seaborn by the time I left. Our traditional methods were insufficient to address their variability, and I didn't even know how to refer to the strange shell in front of me, yet the elder once again casually dismissed my doubts. Forget scientific classifications. In Iberia, it should be called the radiant spine shell. I almost began to doubt whether the elder was truly an Aegir. Perhaps under his hat he had the furry ears of some land-dwelling race, and I simply couldn't see them. I didn't understand what he was thinking. Aegir stories discussed the means of existence, the values of action, the limits of humanity. The fabricating a strange name and bizarre backstory for a weird seaborn shell felt like a waste of time and language. That afternoon, I found a pawn shop in town where I could exchange items for money. I traded my water flow meter for some local currency and set out to find the Aegir settlements. If land dwellers only wanted to hear meaningless babble that butchered language, at least the Aegir still needed stories from home. It was difficult to find fellow Aegir. Nearly every caravan could easily point out the locations of several Aegir settlements. It wasn't difficult, if I said otherwise. It wasn't difficult. The refugees who fled to shore hadn't had time to bring enough equipment and tools, resulting in a strange mix of modern and primitive living conditions. When I arrived, the town was in the process of installing fiber optic cables, supposedly to re-establish contact with the seabed. They were using animals to pull winches and wrapping the delicate cables around rough wooden stakes, which made me nervous just watching. The town guard, a young Aegir woman, observed me from atop a four-legged animal. The saddle she sat on appeared to be made from parts of a scrapped little handy, with pulleys from a wilderness survival module repurposed as stirrups. She nodded, signaling for me to enter. Her smile was unfamiliar to me. It wasn't the precise, graceful smile I learned in the nursery, but a hearty, unrestrained one, a land-dweller smile. That's when I realized that the guard was an Aegir who was born on land. At first, the people here were eager to listen to my stories. After dinner, they would gradually gather by the seaside and light a bonfire, and I would share my tales with them. But over time, the children stopped coming. These Aegir born on the land didn't understand my discussions of meaning, value, and humanity. What they wanted were tales of giant shells and magnificent ships. The elders were still willing to chat with me, but they couldn't solve my biggest problem: money. One simply could not make a living by writing, not even in the Aegir settlements. Generous neighbors would sometimes offer me goods after hearing my stories, but it was never enough to make ends meet. Every day I wake up with an empty, hollow pain as if a pump had drained my abdomen during the night. In the first half of my life, I never experienced this feeling called hunger. It's not enough to cloud my mind, but over time, It makes thinking feel like a luxury. Most of the people in town make their living through farming and manual labor, repetitive mechanical work. I've heard that some Aegir, with the support of Iberian royal family, can engage in scientific research, but they are a rare few. After a month, I returned to that circus run by the local nobility and took that freak show job. I needed to eat. In my spare time, I continued organizing the materials I had brought from Aegir, turning them into stories. I don't know who, if anyone, will ever read them, but I have to keep writing. The end. That was a great section for Aegir. Probably one of my favorite country sections, really. I just like how the culture and everything was presented more from a story perspective. It surprisingly gave more information than Erikson gives on some things. Very interesting. I need to do that. There we go. Very neat. Aegir learning that his self-actuation doesn't matter anymore and regressing to being a laborer who can't have time for creative outlets. Feels bad. Neat section, though. So next time will be Yerig. And, Kazimierz. I was wondering when Kazimierz was going to show up. So Kazimierz is after Yerig. Fair enough. Whoops. We made it through the storm. With minimal interruption. Which I'm glad. I don't know if we will get to this next week. We might be busy with other things. So maybe the week after that. Keep an eye out. And yeah, other than that, I think, thank you all for watching. And until we meet again, may the sands of time treat you well.